He's Robert Klemko, the MMQB.com NFL writer, joining us in the man cave here. We obsess every year at the top of the draft with quarterbacks, and here we go again with Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. Can we just look at them as football players, or do we have to factor in everything else with them? That Mariota with maybe the lack of a personality, Winston maybe with a personality that he can talk himself out of anything, the issues off the field with him. How does it work with scouts when they look at these two talents?
Well, I think if you're talking about a cornerback, say a Marcus Peters, that guy's going to get a lot more rope than Jameis Winston is because he's supposed to be the face of the franchise. You always hear that term around this time of year. Mariota, I really haven't heard a lot of concern about his perceived meekness, but Winston does seem to rub people the wrong way. That's a big factor for teams. I mean, in terms of ranking guys and really selling them to ownership and management, because ownership has more say in these decisions than I think people would like to believe.
Off the record, what are scouts saying?
This is off the record?
Well, you're not attaching names to it. Yeah. But what you've been told off the record, so no names attached, no teams attached to this. What is the consensus that you're getting on both of these players?
Well, I think that a lot of scouts, and in particular one I spoke with yesterday, the freshest in my mind, which is sort of how these things work around this time, think that Mariota is sort of comparable to Cam Newton, but without the arm strength, without the size, and maybe without even the durability. So that's a lot of minuses.
That's not good.
Yeah.
that's. I mean, Cam's a great quarterback, but
right.
Okay, so he's sort of a lesser version of Cam Newton.
Right. And then you hear Ben Roethlisberger for Jameis Winston. I think that there are way more teams that Jameis will fit with.
How many?
I think probably 15 teams would take Jameis Winston on their roster right now, as opposed to maybe 3 or 4 for Mariota.
How surprising is that disparity between the two top quarterbacks?
It's not that surprising to me, just considering all the tools that Mariota has. I mean, I think at the end of the season or somewhere halfway through the season, we were talking about Mariota as a late first-round guy, and then inevitably he starts climbing as, that emphasis on finding that franchise quarterback kind of hits, and everybody starts to realize if a Tennessee doesn't draft a young quarterback, they might lose their jobs at the end of the season. They got nothing holding them on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's a good fit for that offense or those coaches.
It feels like there's a stretch there that we do this with quarterbacks, that we make them maybe a little bit more valuable. The teams sort of get desperate and they go, we can't afford to pass up a quarterback. I think you'll find that more teams should pass up quarterbacks than taking quarterbacks, especially the Cleveland Browns. Right?
Yeah. I mean, their draft history over the last few years in terms of picking anybody is atrocious, and mostly quarterbacks. Brandon Weeden is probably the worst QB pick of the last 5 seasons, I would guess. That or Christian Ponder.
But if you look at the last 5 years, and you said you're going to write about this on mmqb.com today, the last 5 years, if we ranked the quarterbacks going into the draft, or because we already know how Andrew Luck has performed, we already know how RG3 has performed and Cam, how are you going to assess this in ranking where these two quarterbacks this year would be ranked in the last 5 years?
Right. So I had the thought to do the hypothetical, find a team that has evaluated the top quarterbacks, the first-round quarterbacks consistently for the last 5 years. So obviously not, the Colts or the Broncos or the Patriots. And ask somebody within that organization to give you their grades and rank all of those guys. So I have it here on my restaurant receipt.
You're quite the reporter there,
right.
Robert.
You can tell how much work I've done on my column that's coming out tomorrow, right?
It's a bar tab there.
So I had somebody in one of these organizations rank them. The last player of I guess it was 14 quarterbacks that have been chosen in the first round in the last 5 years would be Christian Ponder. The first, as you might guess, is Andrew Luck. He put Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota right in that upper echelon. But, Luck ahead of those guys, Robert Griffin ahead of those guys, Cam Newton ahead of those guys. The one big surprise to me was that people thought as highly of Blaine Gabbert or higher of Blaine Gabbert than they do Mariota.
McLovin. McLovin had a man crush on Blaine Gabbert.
You loved Blaine Gabbert.
I loved him as a pick. I thought teams were going to go nuts over him because he was tall, had a big arm.
You just loved his hair.
He looked like sunshine.
Exactly. And his interviews were amazing. Question, are you talking about their draftability? You're not talking about how they performing. You're talking about how teams viewed them coming in.
How teams viewed them coming in, not considering however they've done since then. And this is how one team viewed them, getting the grades from a single evaluator.
How can you be so misled on Blaine Gabbert? Because it's a spread offense. We saw him for 1 year, and everybody, we bought into this guy who looked like a quarterback. Not necessarily played like a quarterback, but he looked like one. It's almost like, Russell Wilson, that hurt him because he's 5'11". Well, he can't be good. He's 5'11". Instead of saying, how do you play? And I do give Winston credit with this. When he's on the field, there is something to him. I don't think he's athletic, but he's athletic enough. His arm is good. I question some of his reactions and decisions. Not many guys, marquee quarterbacks, can throw 18 interceptions in a year.
Sure.
That's hard to do. But if you were drafting, would you, in your Tampa Bay, knowing what you know about these two, who do you take? And you don't even have to take the quarterback.
Yeah. To your previous point about Blaine Gabbert being able to sell teams on his draftability, I think that this cottage industry of individual private QB coaching has kind of pulled the wool over teams' eyes, where guys like Johnny Manziel or Blaine Gabbert can get prepped well enough to pass these interview phases, whereas they might not have if you talk to them right after their season ended. But in terms of whether or not I would
because Manziel knew everybody's name.
Right.
That when he interviewed, they said, hey, know everybody's first name, know everything about the organization. And they're an Eddie Haskell feel to Johnny Manziel.
Right. I mean, he nailed it. And I think that that's sort of what Jameis Winston has been able to do to an extent. But
okay, so who are you taking?
If I'm the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I want to trade out of the pick. But the market has been set for that at 3 first-round picks. So I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah.
Nobody wants him that badly for three first-round picks.
Exactly. The only way you're getting that is if there's an Andrew Luck in the draft. But so then the other option is to take one of these defensive players. I think that's probably what I would do.
So you wouldn't take the quarterback?
No, I don't like either of the quarterbacks. Going to a bad offensive line, especially. I think Jameis would struggle in a situation where he's not surrounded with the best talent in whatever league he's playing in.
Tampa's got talent at the wide receiver, and, I mean, they've got talent there. Tennessee would be a concern.
Tampa's a concern just because of that offensive line. I mean, if you look at the top teams of the draft, the one consistent is that they all have horrible pass blocking.
Yeah. So you take a defensive, but I'm with you. I would keep Glennon, and then I would take a player that I know. If I could trade out of it, and I could get a couple of first-round draft picks, I would trade with the Browns, and I would say, here you go, guys. Give us your 2 first-round picks, and we'll give you the number 1 pick overall, and we'll take a second-round pick. We'll even take Johnny Manziel off your hands, too.
Right.
So then you do that. Let them take Mariota if that's who they want, and then you can strengthen your team.
Johnny Manziel getting taken off their hands. I mean, they do a lot for that.
Yeah. But see, there you go. You can. Is Manziel's future going to be there?
I don't think so. I think that a lot of people in that organization have moved on.
Who would take Manziel?
The Argonauts?
Toronto. Do you have a source there on that?
No.
Do you have 2 sources? Is it on your bar receipt there?
No, what does this say here? Cheesesteak egg roll.
Nice. I like that. Cheesesteak, maybe Philadelphia there for Johnny Manziel. I'm trying to think. Now, so with the draft, everybody's consumed with that. You also have this L.A. situation going on here. You got 2 different groups, 2 different stadium possibilities here. How does this play out?
You saw last night the late-breaking news that the funds have been approved for a Raiders-Chargers scenario.
Yeah.
When all of this talk started heating up, I mean, my gut said Rams. Just having been in each of those situations, being to all 3 of those stadiums.
Well, the Rams are going.
Yeah.
But the question is, who else is going, and is there just one stadium?
I think there's just one stadium. I think the 2-team model works for Los Angeles better than anything else. I think that a 1-team moving there, you're threatened with the repeat of the Rams or the Raiders situation. I can't tell at this point. I'm not an expert on the LA stuff.
Well, I thought maybe you knew people who knew people.
I've been so knee deep in this draft stuff, just talking to scouts.
Do they ever tell you the truth, though? Do you know if they're telling you the truth?
You can get a good idea for who's telling you the truth based on whether or not they need or have any kind of possibility of getting the player they're talking about. If it's a scout for, let's say, Philadelphia giving you an opinion on Jameis Winston, that person really has no kind of incentive to trash or raise up Jameis Winston unless he's got some kind of ties to a coach of Jameis or something.
But you wouldn't believe Ken Wisenhunt if he told you what he was thinking about at number 2.
No, I wouldn't. But then there are also people within those organizations that don't really care to play the politics game. Maybe you're just friendly with them and they'll just tell you what they really think.
Have you been lied to?
I think so, yeah. This offseason. Yeah.
Isn't that weird, though?
It's uncomfortable. You don't text that person anymore.
Can you give me a story without the team?
Yeah. No, I can't.
Would have made for good radio there, Robert.
Sorry.
Would have made for good radio. Can you give me one with the team name? Hey, good luck in your travels there. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for having me.
He's Robert Klemko of the MMQB.com NFL writer.